Hi everyone, welcome back to the Get a Brew channel. So today we've got 5 minutes with Chris Morris. Chris is the owner, head brewer, jack of all trades for Modest Beer. Originally from Northern Ireland and started his brewing career as a home brewer. Moved on to starting a commercial brewery in a double garage in Hollywood, and Chris will tell you that's Hollywood with one L in County Down, not the famous Hollywood. So
for us, the famous Hollywood.
It is the famous Hollywood, yeah. For us, it's been a pleasure to work with Chris from homebrew right through to professional brewery, and he's now obviously in-house in our brewery set up here. So he brews a range of modern pale ales, excellent reputation in the local market, brewing packaged beer in cans and kegs. And I guess questions that I think the viewers are going to want me to ask is, you brew a modern pale style, usually very hop forward, usually very pillowy and mellow, almost New England-esque, in a range of different hop profiles and a range of different ABV. So whenever you're designing those type of beer recipes, what's the thought process? If you could break that down for us in malt, hops, and recipe.
I suppose with those beers, well, with any beer really, my process is just sort of starting with the end. What do you want in the glass at the end? What does it look like? What does the mouth feel? What does it smell like? And then work backwards from that. So for that sort of New England style, soft, pillowy type of modern pale ale, the water profile is really important. I think for those sorts of beers, I'd be pushing chloride pretty high.
Have you a ratio chloride to carbonates or anything that you use, or?
Somewhere between, for the pale ales, probably about 170 parts per million chloride to 200 for the kind of bigger beers. I tend not to really add any sulfate or minimal sulfate. There's a little bit present already in the source water, so for those sorts of beers I tend to leave that where it's at. And then building on top of that, the malt. I think the mouthfeel and the body of those beers is really important. So there's typically plenty of adjuncts in those beers with sort of wheat malt and oat malt. I would use quite a bit. Maybe add to that with some flaked or torrefied wheat or oats as well, depending on, again, the beer and what the end goal is.
What sort of mash temperatures your go to for that New England pillowy sort of softness?
So for the lower ABV beers, I would tend to mash quite high, around about 69 degrees, trying to retain. I think most of the yeasts I'd be using attenuate reasonably, so it's kind of to try and taper that and sort of finish for them sort of 4.5% to 5% pale ales, finishing around 10-16.
A bit of residual sweetness left.
Bit of residual sweetness, yeah. To kind of balance out those hops, you're hitting these beers with a lot of hops in the whirlpool and the dry hop, and I think a bit of sweetness sort of helps just accentuate that and balance it out a bit. If they finish dry, it can kind of potentially be a bit astringent or.
So you want a bit of sweetness to balance the hop bitterness, that sort of it's more rounded rather than being like West Coast style where it's bitter. So you touched on malt and hops there briefly. When it comes to New England, then are you all about whirlpool hops, or do you add any bitter and hops, or what's the hopping schedule?
I would usually have a small first wort hop of maybe 5 or 10 IBUs, but that's it. It's a drop in the ocean really when you look at the hop bill further down the chain. Then typically I'll hop in the whirlpool anywhere between sort of 6 to 8 grams per litre, depending on the hop variety, and I'll typically do that somewhere between 80 and 85 degrees C for most of the whirlpool charge. And then over to the dry hop, which I'm kind of playing about with at the minute. I'm still trying to find what process works best. So for the kind of limited edition one-off beers, I'll change the process just to experiment with sort of mid-fermentation, post-fermentation, temperatures, duration in the tank, rising the tank, just to try and get the best extraction and utilisation out of those hops.
And like you see a trend at the minute with brewers that they want to put 22 grams per litre, 25 grams per litre. You and I know each other well. I'm more the lower end of that. I'd be like sort of for me, if I'm brewing an IPA at home, I'm like 5 to 10 grams per litre. I really like, just because that's my thing. But I really enjoy your beers, you know. So I can develop a palate for it. But where's the sweet spot for you, and not just putting your, you know, hop head on, but the commercial aspect of it? Where's a good point to be gram per litre that you're actually making something as well?
Yeah, so I think for our two core hoppy beers, the Pale Ale and IPA, which are 4.2 and 5.5% respectively, they are probably around sort of 9 grams per litre for the Pale Ale and the dry hop, and about 12 for the IPA. That's probably, I think, the sweet spot for me. Any less than that, and I don't feel like it's one of my beers. So that's where I found the sweet spot for those beers that I'm making a lot of and making year round. And then the one-off beers where you're trying to make a big impact or showcase a particular hop, and you're maybe up in the usage to make an impact. But if you're looking for a beer that's you're selling in six, sorry about that. If you're looking for a beer that you can kind of sell, a beer that you can kind of sell in 6-packs and people are happy to fill their fridge and have a few of them, I think that's kind of the angle I've gone for those kind of core 330ml beers.
And the core beers, when you're doing the dry hopping schedule, are you one of these dry hopping during the last part of active fermentation, or do you wait and dry hop at a lower temperature? What's the usual?
Yeah, so I have done that, and I think with the Brewix tanks, we're naturally carbonating the beer, so it, I suppose just for ease of process, dry hopping towards the end of fermentation and capping the tank at the same time worked. But more recently been experimenting with letting fermentation finish, dropping the temperature down to about 15 degrees and dry hopping at that point.
What did you find worked best in your experience with that?
There's probably a mix of the two, to be honest. I think you're actually, where you've got a reasonable amount of hops in the whirlpool, I think you're getting a good amount of carryover into the fermentation vessel, i.e. you're probably getting a good amount of biotransformation anyway without the mid-fermentation dry hop, so that's why I'm kind of pushing more towards
after fermentation.
And also hop creep, which is, I don't know if you've experienced that with any of your beers, but if there's any I suppose unfermentable sugars in there that, well, you think they're unfermentable at the right temperature and with enough hops in there, and the enzyme activity will kick off a second fermentation. So,
and that's not always pleasant, but it can also be really unusual and pleasing on occasion. So it just depends on the beer style and what hop you're using, whether that hop creep's a good thing or not.
It drags out the process a bit as well, so the beer's in tank a little bit longer, you have a second diacetyl rest. So dropping the beer to 15 degrees and dry hopping then reduces that enzyme activity. They're not active at that temperature, so it sort of hopefully nips that issue in the bud and allows you to just turn the beer around a little bit quicker.
And selecting hops, like we've tasted some of your beer this afternoon there, some of them are beautiful, like some new hop varieties I haven't tried in a while myself. How do you choose those hop varieties? Is that through sampling other beers using them, or is it reading the profile and the descriptors on the websites, or what's the thought process for you when you're picking a hop?
So when I first started doing this commercially, I started with my core beers, but then a couple of single hop beers as well, and that was really partly to showcase new modern hops and put them into a pale ale and just present them, but also it was useful for me to see how they worked and get a feel for them. Then I can sort of understand them a bit and sort of figure out, well, what would that work well with? How would I blend that with another hop variety? And other times it is if you just don't have access to those hops for a period of time, you've maybe tried beers with them in it, or there's just a bit of noise generally in the industry about the hops variety, kind of gather a bit of momentum, and that sort of spikes interest as well.
The thing I have a great interest in is what hops pair well with others, you know, what shines together, and you know, you can only really do that through, well, my personal experience for doing it, like we can speak to the technical department at Barth Haas and they'll tell us what their opinions is, and we look at flavour charts and that, but I always find that good, solid commercial examples of it would when I taste it, I get excited and think, yeah, I like what they've did, and I might not know the dosage rate, and I might not know, you know, how they paired it, but I know that I like the outcome, so then I'll try and make my version of that, you know. So I suppose we've covered hops, malt, water profile there. So yeast, have you a go-to yeast that you like to make a modern pale, you know, or is it a house strain, or what's your usual?
No, so it's probably, I started off using a Vermont ale yeast, and I've sort of flipped now between that and the Verdant IPA yeast as well, which is like the dried London Ale 3. So both of those I find are really good at making those styles of beer, each sort of slightly distinct in their own way. But
And you have a beer coming out soon. We tried it this evening with a Hefeweizen yeast paired with a New England yeast, was it, or a Verdant yeast?
yeah, it was Verdant yeast, so it's 90% of the Verdant IPA and 10% Hefeweizen. Thought process there was trying to tease a little bit of banana esters out of the Hefeweizen yeast to support the sort of apricot-y esters you get from the yeast, and also I've used cashmere to dry hop, which is quite a melony stone fruit type of aroma. So it was trying to, I suppose, make those three work well together, and try and make because modern pales, I suppose, you know, it's a really popular style at the minute, so trying to make something that's unique and has a flavour profile that people maybe haven't seen or tasted before.
It's got a massive client base. Like my sister, brother-in-law, mother, father, you know, even me and my wife, like we enjoy modern pale ales. So you've got a massive range of age groups and flavour profiles there, and huge demographic. So that's why we wanted to cover with you 5 minutes with yourself, because you're a perfect working example of someone that focuses on modern pales and makes them really well. So being a home brewer that's went professional, any tips for the home brewer out there for making it? Like, I know we've broken down your process, but is there anything you'd say that they should focus on to really make that modern pale shine?
I think just consistency and frequency. Like, the only way to learn is to put it into practice, understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and if it doesn't work out, or something could have been done better, or something isn't the way you want it, reverse engineer the process and your recipe and what you've done, and try and fix it and do it again. And I think that's, you know, it's the only way to make really good beer, I think, is just consistency and practice. And
so is that 5 minutes with Chris?
Oh, it's 12.
So 12 minutes with Chris. But look, modern pale ales are something we're really interested in. We really enjoy them. Modest Beer make excellent, consistent example of that style. They're distributed in Northern Ireland through Nelson Sullivan Distribution. They're in lots of the local independent off-sales bars and restaurants. Go out and buy his beers, try them, comment below, let us know what you think of them. We'll put a link to Chris's website and to Nelson Sullivan Distributor, so you know how to get hold of them. So Chris, thanks so much for giving us 12 minutes of your time. So,
no problem.
until next time, happy brewing.